It's Midnight Shop and you're watching World News program with me, Madam ZM, to the headlines. 15 died in Zionist airstrikes targeting homes near Kamal Adwan Hospital in northern Gaza. Dozens of others also died across northern, central and southern Gaza, with 38 martyrs reported from 3 Israeli massacres in the Strip over the past 24 hours. Also coming up, UNRWA compares the situation in Gaza to a post-apocalyptic world. The UN confirms that the occupation continues to block aid deliveries to northern Gaza. Meanwhile, the UNGA adopts a resolution affirming the Palestinians' right to self-determination. In developments regarding Syria, Geir Pedersen emphasized the need for immediate humanitarian assistance and calls for free and fair election, while the EU Commission calls for reconsidering European sanctions to facilitate Syria's reconstruction. And on the second day of the 8th Arab Housing Conference in Algiers, Algeria and China reaffirmed their commitment to continue cooperation and expand efforts in housing projects. This and more right after a break. Hello and welcome back to the details. First in our news, a number of Palestinians were killed and others injured on Wednesday morning in Israeli airstrikes targeting homes near Kamal Adwan Hospital in northern Gaza. According to local Palestinian sources, Israeli warplanes carried out airstrikes targeting homes near Kamal Adwan Hospital, resulting in the deaths of at least 15 Palestinians and causing numerous injuries. This occurred amid heavy gunfire from Israeli forces in the vicinity of the hospital. As you followed in our top stories, the Israeli occupation continues to implement its plan to destroy Gaza's healthcare system by directly targeting hospitals and medical centers, rendering them inoperable. Kamal Adwan Hospital, one of the primary targets, has borne the brunt of these attacks but remains steadfast. Usama Ayadi has the following report.
Fire raged through the rubble in the early hours of Wednesday after a Zionist strike hit a house near Gaza's Kamal Adwan Hospital in Beit Lahia. The strike, which hit a residential building just outside the hospital, struck right before midnight, leaving at least 10 people dead.
A little while ago, one of the hospital's neighbors was targeted, which is a house next to Kamal Adwan Hospital. It is a few meters away from us. Unfortunately, until now, we have retrieved more than 8 martyrs, all of them burned. They arrived in pieces. Most of them are children, women and elderly. Until this moment, 8 martyrs arrived to us, half of them children and the other half were mothers.
Speaking after the strike, the hospital director Hussam Abu Safiya reported that several bodies were still trapped under the rubble, and according to survivors and eyewitnesses, the hospital lacks the tools and resources to dig into the ruins and assist casualties properly.
The situation is dangerous. We do not have the capabilities to extinguish the fire, of course, and there are no tools to recover people from the rubble. There are a number of them still under the rubble, according to what one of the survivors described.
Zionist occupation forces have operated in the area since October. Medics affirmed that the strikes killed at least 20 Palestinians overnight in the Strip.
الكل يعلم مستشفانا أصلا يناشد العالم منذ أكثر من 75 يوم
Everyone knows that our hospital has been appealing to the world for more than 75 days that we need capabilities, supplies, and tools, and that our hospital is barely providing humanitarian services. But we have no choice but to appeal again. Perhaps there will be a listening ear and meet the needs of Kamal Adwan Hospital so that we can provide humanitarian service.
Kamal Adwan Hospital remains a symbol of resistance and steadfastness of the Palestinians as it has endured several attacks by the Zionist war machine. Medics of the hospital have repeatedly launched distress calls over the catastrophic situation and the lack of medical supplies. However, their calls remained inaudible for the international community at a time when the occupation forces continue to perpetrate unprecedented war crimes in the Gaza Strip in general and Kamal Adwan Hospital in particular.
38 Palestinians were killed and 203 others injured in 3 massacres committed by the Israeli occupation in Gaza within the last 24 hours. According to a statement by the Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza on Wednesday, Israeli forces have continued their aggression on Gaza by air, land, and sea since October 7, 2023. This has resulted in a death toll of 45,097 martyrs and 107,244 injured. UNRWA Commissioner General Philippe Lazzarini described the situation in Gaza as similar to a post-apocalyptic world due to the ongoing genocide by the Israeli occupation. Lazzarini also confirmed that no place in Gaza is safe amidst the continued genocide.
We do not have enough words to describe the situation in Gaza. Those who return from there describe an environment that resembles the post-disaster world, where people live amidst garbage, sewage and rubble, struggling daily to cope with death, hunger and disease.
UN Secretary-General spokesperson Stéphane Dujarric stated that the Israeli occupation has rejected 38 aid requests and missions since the beginning of December and continues to obstruct efforts to deliver supplies in northern Gaza. In a press statement on Wednesday, as reported by the Palestinian Wafa news agency, Dujarric stressed the need to protect civilians in Gaza and meet urgent humanitarian need for food and medicine.
Israeli authorities have once again rejected 3 humanitarian aid missions from the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OSHA, which planned to bring food and water to parts of besieged northern Gaza. We call on Israel to facilitate the work of UN missions and their relief partners in the besieged areas of northern Gaza.
The UN General Assembly adopted a resolution on Tuesday reaffirming the Palestinian people's right to self-determination by a large majority. 172 countries voted in favor of the resolution, 7 voted against it, and 8 abstained. This decision reflects the international stance against the Zionist and occupation practices that impede the Palestinian people's ability to exercise their right to self-determination and live with dignity in their independent state. And Algeria has called on the UN Security Council to assume its responsibility in stopping the war of extermination waged by the occupation against the Gaza Strip. In his speech at its Security Council session devoted to discussing the situation in the Middle East, including Palestine, Algeria's permanent representative to the UN, Ammar Ben Jama, stressed that the Palestinians in Gaza are facing death in a war of extermination, stressing the need for the Security Council to assume its responsibility in order to preserve international peace and security.
For achieving last in Gaza, people are not living. They are simply waiting to die. People are not living. They are simply waiting to die. As the Secretary General himself recalled, the catastrophe is for us a moral and legal duty. Madam President, a ceasefire in Gaza is long overdue. We deeply regret these councils' inability to demand.
Benjamin renewed Algeria's condemnation of Zionist official statements calling for the annexation of the West Bank and the establishment of more settlements. Let's have a listen.
The situation in the West Bank, including Al-Quds al-Sharif, is equally alarming. The Security Council, the General Assembly, and the International Court of Justice have reaffirmed that Israeli settlements and associated practices constitute flagrant violations of international law. We reiterate our strong condemnation of the decisions adopted by the Israeli authorities aimed at halting UNRWA's activities in the occupying Palestinian territories.
Irish Prime Minister Simon Harris condemned the Israeli occupation following its decision to close its embassy in Irish capital Dublin in response to Ireland's criticism of the genocide in Gaza. In statements to journalists in Dún Laoghaire, Harris asserted that Israel cannot silence his country's criticism of the genocide being carried out by its forces against the Palestinian people in Gaza. He denounced the systematic killing, starvation, and destruction inflicted by the occupation in the territory.
You're all asking about Ireland's stance, but what about Israel's actions? What about Netanyahu's practices against innocent children in Gaza? This is diplomacy of destruction. Do you know what should be condemned, in my opinion? The killing of children. Do you know what should be condemned, in my opinion? The horror of civilian deaths in Gaza. Do you know what should be condemned, in my opinion? Leaving people to face hunger and blocking humanitarian aid. No one will silence Ireland.
And in other developments, the Israeli occupation forces committed 12 violations of the ceasefire with Lebanon, one of which resulted in injuries to 3 individuals. This brings the total number of ceasefire violations by the Israeli entity since the implementation of the ceasefire 20 days ago to 248. Today's violations were concentrated in the Tyre district in South Governorate, as well as districts of Marja'iyun and Hasbaya and Nabatiya Governorate and the districts of Rashaya and Western Biqa'. The UN Security Council called on Tuesday evening for an inclusive political process led by Syrians, urging the Syrian people to determine their future democratically. In a unanimous statement issued at the conclusion of a session of the situation in Syria, the Council stressed that the political process must meet the aspirations of Syrians, enable them to shape their future, and called on neighboring countries to refrain from actions that could undermine regional security. It also emphasized the importance of preventing terrorist groups from reestablishing their capacities in Syria. The UN Special Envoy for Syria, Geir Pedersen, emphasized the need for immediate humanitarian assistance to Syria to aid its economic recovery. He expressed hope for the start of a process to lift sanctions. In a statement from Damascus on Wednesday, Pedersen noted that the conflict in Syria is not yet over and highlighted challenges in other areas.
Of course, we all know it's only 11 days since HTS and the other groups came to Damascus, so it's early days. But I think it's important to say that there is a lot of hope that we can now see the beginning of a new Syria. A new Syria that, in line with Security Council Resolution 2254, will adopt a new constitution that will ensure that it is a social contract, a new social contract for all Syrians, and that we will have free and fair elections when that time comes, after a transitional period, also in line with Security Council Resolution 2254. We need immediate humanitarian assistance, but we also need to make sure that Syria can be rebuilt, that we can see economic recovery, and that we can hopefully see the beginning where we start the process to end sanctions.
The European Commission stressed the need to reconsider sanctions imposed on Syria to facilitate reconstruction efforts. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said in press remarks that the recent developments in Syria are encouraging, especially in the past days.
Since 2011, we have mobilized 33 billion euros through our annual Syria conferences, and we will continue this support. But we might need a new focus on early recovery and reconstruction. So we are speaking about water, electricity, infrastructure, etc.
Algerian Minister of State and Minister of Foreign Affairs and African Affairs, Ahmed Attaf, discussed developments in the Middle East, particularly the latest updates on Syria, with the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Kaya Kallas. A statement from the Algerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs added that both sides discussed relations between Algeria and the European Union and ways to enhance them within the framework of building a balanced partnership that benefits both parties. Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune received on Wednesday the CEO of Lion Group, Tantri William Chang. A statement from the Algerian presidency clarified that the meeting was attended by Boualem Boualem, director of the presidential office, and several ministers, including the Minister of Energy and Mines, the Minister of Industry, and the Director General of the Algerian Agency for Investment Promotion. President Tebboune also received the United Kingdom's Ambassador Sharon Wardle and Greece's Ambassador Georgios Zakariou-Dakis in farewell visits marking the end of their respective missions in Algeria. The Algerian head of state, Mr. Tebboune, presided over a ceremony to accept the credentials of 5 new ambassadors to Algeria, including the ambassadors of Japan, Brazil, Malaysia, Sierra Leone, and Kazakhstan. Algerian Minister of Foreign Affairs Ahmed Attaf emphasized Algeria's prominent position on the international scene thanks to its consistent foreign policy, reflecting the principles of November 1st, 1954 declaration.
Algeria has earned a prestigious position on the international stage thanks to its foreign policy, which is rooted in a high degree of coherence and consistency. Algeria's foreign policy has always been marked by strength and dynamism, particularly in its African and Arab dimensions. The principles of Algeria's foreign policy, tied to the Liberation Revolution, remain central to all its actions and initiatives at every level. These principles include the values of freedom, independence, equality of rights among nations, and the right of people to self-determination, values enshrined in the founding texts of the Algerian state, from 1963 Constitution to the 2020 Constitution.
The 8th Arab Housing Conference continued its sessions for the second day in Algiers, where housing experts from various Arab countries discussed topics related to sustainable housing and urban development.
We will present a set of recommendations proposed by Arab researchers, consolidated into a unified format, to be presented at the conclusion of the conference proceedings. The challenge lies in how we can address these issues, especially since the conference's theme is sustainable urbanism, challenges and promising hopes. So, how can we translate these recommendations into actionable outcomes?
Still in the same context, and in a statement to All 24 News, the Saudi Deputy Minister for Residential Supply and Real Estate Development, Abdurrahman Al-Tawil, praised Algeria's experience in the housing sector, describing it as significant and noteworthy. Let's have a listen.
اليوم نرى
Today we see enthusiasm, collaboration and a race to deliver better services to the Arab citizen. I believe the housing sector is a vital one, as everyone aspires to achieve stability in this area. Through my cooperation with a group of ministers and housing officials, I see an unconventional level of enthusiasm. There's also growing interest in connecting housing projects with the concept of vibrant communities, ensuring these projects are not just about providing housing, but about creating integrated communities that enhance quality of life. In my view, this is what everyone aspires to, and it is undoubtedly what will make a real difference in people's lives.
Algerian Minister of Housing, Urban Planning and the City, Tariq Belarabi, received the Chinese Minister of Housing, Urban and Rural Development, Ni Hong, at the Algerian Ministry's headquarters on the sidelines of his participation as part of the 8th Housing or Arab Housing Conference. The two ministers discussed opportunities to expand cooperation in urban planning and construction and to follow up on the implementation of agreements made by the leaders of the two countries.
تحدي تاعنا انه ننطلق في 2 مليون.
The challenge is to move forward with the plan for 2 million housing units, meaning during the term 2020, 2024, 2029, and the first term 2020, 2024, 1.7 million housing units were distributed. Let me say that there are shortcomings. We created urban hubs, new cities, and several hubs that allowed us to accommodate the 1.7 million housing units. But there are deficiencies. Let's be honest with ourselves. It's necessary to address these shortcomings. The upcoming housing program of 2 million units will, God willing, aim to rectify these shortcomings, identifying on the ground in new projects. Aim to rectify these shortcomings identified on the ground in new projects. We will rely on Chinese expertise in this field, urban planning, construction, and the establishment of these urban hubs.
في مجال إنشاء هذه الأقطاب الحضرية.
And for his part, Chinese Minister of Housing, Urban and Rural Development affirmed his country's readiness to provide Algeria with the necessary technical expertise for the implementation of housing and urban development projects. Let's have a listen.
I agreed with the minister to implement all the provisions of the agreement signed by the leaders of the two countries as part of a comprehensive cooperation. We greatly appreciate and welcome President Tebboun's initiative regarding the project to build 2 million housing units and the Media City project. We are eager to exchange and transfer our technical expertise in this regard. During this visit, I was impressed by the natural scenery. You also have innovative ideas and distinctive projects in various areas related to the housing sector, as well as significant space available for implementation. Therefore, the potential areas of cooperation between us are vast. We look forward to collaborating with the Minister in the field of urban development, where the exchange of expertise will mark a new phase of partnership and cooperation between the two countries.
Data from Eurostat revealed that Algeria topped the list of natural gas exporters to the European Union in October. The statistics reported by Russia's Novosti agency showed that Algeria's share of European imports has reached 21.6%. The Polisario Front's representative to Switzerland and the UN in Geneva, Bouchraya El-Bashir, stated that the democratization of Morocco is tied to resolving the Western Sahara conflict based on the principles and traditions of the UN in decolonization.
The Spanish government must reconsider its current position and respect international legitimacy. Public pressure plays a crucial role in influencing Spain's policies on Western Sahara. We affirm the importance of roundtable discussions in advancing legal and political efforts to defend the rights of the Sahrawi people. While legal actions continue at the European and international levels, popular solidarity and the official stances of influential states remain essential pillars for achieving justice and enabling the Sahrawi people to determine their own destiny.
The Russian Federal Security Service, FSB, announced the arrest of the perpetrator responsible for assassinating Igor Kirillov, the head of the Russian Army's Radiation, Chemical and Biological Defense Forces. In a statement on Wednesday, the FSB said that an active search operation led to the capture of a citizen from Uzbekistan who was recruited by Ukrainian intelligence services. Investigators of the main investigation directorate of the Investigative Committee of Russia, in cooperation with the Russian Intelligence Service and the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Russia, detained citizens of the Republic of Uzbekistan, born in 1995, on suspicion of committing a terrorist act that killed Igor Kirillov and his assistant Ilya Polikarpov. The investigative actions are being carried out with the detainee, and during interrogation he explained that he had been recruited by the Ukrainian Special Forces. Following their instructions, he arrived in Moscow and received an improvised explosive device. He placed it on an electric scooter, which he parked at the entrance of the apartment building where Igor Kirillov lived. And on Wednesday, the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs stated that economic and trade cooperation between the U.S. and China is mutually beneficial, responding to an upcoming U.S. congressional vote on legislation aimed at restricting American investments in China. And that's all for me and the rest of the team. Thank you for watching and have a great night.